needed a deeper emotional connection to understand what had really happened to my father, leaving him with a post-traumatic stress disorder that had affected our family for decades. On the first page of my father's yellowed and brittle diary was one word: Zavada. I discovered that Zavada was a little village with great significance for him. Eventually, I located it, after cross-referencing the name with surrounding towns mentioned in the diary, and determining that the German Zavada was now the Czech Zavada, spelled with a V instead of a W. I ruled out several other villages with the same name in Poland, since I knew that my father had fought in what is now the Czech Republic, but until 1993 was part of Czechoslovakia, in an area Sudeten Germans had inhabited since the Middle Ages. Using a place name dictionary published by displaced Sudeten Germans, I reconstructed his route from a pre-Second World War map of the area. In his old age, my father could have returned to Zavada, once West Germans were allowed to travel into the former communist states after 1990, when the Cold War ended. But my mother told me he had refused. They had only traveled as far as Pirna, a town located between Dresden and Germany's border with the Czech Republic. By the time I read the diary, he was dead. I felt obliged to complete the journey for him. After translating the village's Czech website, I sent an email in English to Zavada's mayor. The mayor's English-speaking assistant, Andrea Lorkova, sent me a kind reply and invited me to visit. In March 2013, I started out from Berlin and headed toward Dresden on the Autobahn, rebuilt with several lanes after Germany's reunification in 1990. The new highway system once again connected the two parts of Germany. I followed my father's original route from Berlin. His cattle train had stopped on the outskirts of the city on the way to the Eastern Front. When I first read the diary, the place names Hans mentioned meant nothing to me. For my generation of West Germans, the areas south and east of Berlin were blank parts of the map, hidden behind the Iron Curtain. Now these places appeared before my eyes. The weather was just as cold and unpleasant as it must have been when my father was deployed in the spring of 1945, with snow flurries and a still frozen ground. After a 2-hour drive, I reached Dresden and enjoyed a stroll through its carefully rebuilt historic city center, the city once more a magnet for culture and art. Dresden was in total ruins when Hans traveled through. When the Allies dropped a record number of bombs on the city in 1945, Dresden was overflowing with thousands of desperate refugees. Among them, hundreds of children were killed. After Dresden, my route narrowed to a single lane, involving hairpin curves over mountain ranges and winding through farming villages with speed restrictions. I stopped at the small city of Pirna, 16 miles south of Dresden, where Hans had stayed in a hospital for several weeks. The kindness of Pirna's inhabitants, who had shared their own meager rations with the injured boy soldiers, left a lasting impression on him. I passed the turn to the small town of Bad Gottloeba, where my father spent another month in a sanatorium, recuperating from his injuries. I decided not to stop, as I wanted to reach the Czech Republic before dark. The drive took me through the Switzerland of Saxony, with its dramatic mountain ranges and deep forests. In the fading light, I drove through the valley of the river Elbe, with its spooky, bizarre rock formations, just as Hans had described it. I spent the first night in the Czech border town of Děčín, once known as the Sudeten German town of Těčín. I chose to stay at the Hotel Faust, an image of the demon Mephisto gracing its entrance hall. Goethe's play of the same name as the hotel had been my father's favorite. He carried the book with him during his whole ordeal. The next day, I drove over a mountain range through several villages in which the famous Bohemian crystal is still produced. Glistening chandeliers could be seen in small shop windows that advertised outlet sales. I passed several antique shops and decided to stop at one. Many items had German writing on them: a first aid kit, kitchen...